I want you to imagine a war zone,
Right.
but not in a collapsed state halfway across the globe or, across some heavily fortified international border.
Sure.
I want you to picture a war zone right in the geographic heart of the world's largest booming democracy, a secret, silent war that has basically raged for over half a century.
Yeah, it's essentially a parallel nation, a complete shadow state operating entirely off the grid. Like if you look at a map of India, there is this distinct red corridor.
Right, the Red Corridor.
Exactly. And it doesn't just cross one or two local counties. It stretches like a spine across 10 entire Indian states.
It's massive. And, well, that's exactly what we are diving deep into today. Our source material for this deep dive is just a staggering piece of on-the-ground investigative journalism.
It really is.
It's the book Hello, Bastard, The Untold Story of India's Maoist Movement by Rahul Pandita. And, our mission today is to answer a series of questions that just completely defy logic.
Oh, absolutely. The contradictions are wild.
Right. Like, how does a single stolen bag of rice in 1967 ignite a 50-year insurgency? Or why are the absolute poorest, most malnourished people on planet Earth sitting directly on top of trillions of dollars of wealth?
Yeah.
And how does a shadow government establish total control using an entry fee of just 10 rupees?
But before we step into all that, we really need to make a firm agreement with you, the listener.
Very important.
Because to understand the actual mechanics of this conflict, we have to look at it without a filter. The facts reported in this material, they involve some deeply visceral, stomach-turning violence.
Yeah, it gets incredibly brutal.
Exactly. We're going to discuss extreme brutality enacted by the left-wing Maoist insurgents and equally horrifying violence carried out by the right-wing militias and the state security forces.
Right. There are no clear-cut heroes in a 50-year bloodbath. We are absolutely not here to moralize or endorse any political ideology or, take sides.
No, not at all.
Our only job today is to dissect the facts.
Yeah.
We want to take apart the machinery of this insurgency and show you exactly how the gears turn.
Just stick to the source material.
Exactly. And to do that, we have to start with a paradox so massive, it almost feels like a glitch in reality. I want you to picture the capital city, New Delhi, right as it is preparing to host the Commonwealth Games.
Yeah, this is a critical starting point because it really establishes a whole psychological baseline for the conflict.
Right.
Delhi, in the lead up to those games, was a city obsessed. I mean, they were determined to project this image of an unstoppable capitalist superpower to the global media.
Oh, totally. Throwing billions at infrastructure.
Trillions. But the way they handled the reality of the city is just staggering. They didn't just clean up the streets. They literally tried to hide millions of human beings.
Yeah, the source material talks about the government erecting these Leviathan billboards, just massive towering walls of vinyl and steel.
And their only structural purpose, like literally their only purpose, was to physically block the foreign athletes and the tourists from seeing the sprawling slums behind them.
Just sweeping an entire population under a rug.
Right. They just wanted the cameras to capture, glitzy shopping malls and air-conditioned department stores selling imported soy milk and fresh broccoli.
A completely manufactured reality.
Oh, yeah.
But behind those billboards, you have areas like the Molar Band Extension Colony in South Delhi.
Yeah.
And this is where the working class, the actual invisible engine of the city, actually lives. Thousands of daily wage laborers.
The people actually building the stadiums.
Exactly. Construction workers building the tracks the athletes are going to run on. Private security guards. They swarm out every single morning on these ramshackle bicycles and just disappear into the city to work for pennies.
And while they are building this glittering metropolis, they are quite literally being crushed by the math of their own survival.
Complex arithmetic.
Right. The author calls it this complex arithmetic that governs their lives. I mean, let's look at the numbers. The price of dal, which is basic lentils, right?
Yeah, the absolute foundational calorie source for the working poor in India.
Exactly. The price of dal had skyrocketed to almost 100 rupees a kilo.
Which is insane.
To understand the weight of that number, you have to realize that 100 rupees a kilo meant a laborer might have to spend their entire day's wage, just their whole wage, just to secure a basic protein source for their family.
Oh, wow.
There was an old popular film song that the working class used to sing. The lyrics essentially said, eat your dal and roti and sing praises to God.
Like a mantra of making do with the basics.
Yeah. But the author notes that at 100 rupees a kilo, the math completely breaks down. They didn't know what to eat, let alone who they were supposed to be thanking.
Because they're completely priced out of survival in the city they're building with their bare hands.
Right.
Meanwhile, you have the city's middle and upper class living in just a completely different dimension.
Oh, the contrast is violent. It's truly violent. Like, on a Sunday afternoon, a middle-class family from South Delhi might drive out to India Gate, grab some ice cream, maybe catch a movie at an air-conditioned multiplex.
Sounds like a normal weekend.
Sure, but the book calculates that a single casual Sunday outing like that would cost a family of 4 at least 1,500 rupees.
Okay, 1,500 rupees for a couple of hours of entertainment.
Right.
And here is the statistic that just completely stops you in your tracks. 1,500 rupees is more money than what 74 million households in India earned in 2 entire months.
It's hard to even process that.
Let me say that again. Over 37% of the Indian population at that time. They survive for 60 days on less capital than a middle-class family spends on popcorn and a movie ticket.
It's a completely mind-blowing disparity. It's so extreme it stops being an economic issue and actually becomes a physical hazard.
Yeah, because the official malnutrition rate in New Delhi hit 35%.
Right, in the capital city.
The capital of an economic superpower had a malnutrition rate worse than some of the most impoverished nations in Sub-Saharan Africa.
It defies all common sense.
And the brutal irony, in that exact same city, public health surveys were showing that 40% of private school children were clinically overweight.
It is the ultimate paradox. You have starvation living directly next door to excess. And the people making the decisions, a handful of politicians sitting in the parliament building, they were completely insulated from this reality.
Totally cut off. To the millions of laborers behind the billboards, the state essentially did not exist as a protective force.
No, it only existed to bulldoze their homes for a sports event.
Right. You displace hundreds of thousands of people, you seal up factories overnight for zoning violations, rendering thousands jobless in an instant, you leave them staring at grocery shelves they can never afford.
You're packing a powder keg with generational trauma.
Exactly. But here's the massive twist. The laborers behind the billboards aren't the ones who organized the rebellion.
No, they weren't.
Which caught me completely off guard. The architects of this massive underground insurgency weren't angry, starving farmers. They were the absolute top-tier elite.
It is a massive counterintuitive leap. I mean, when we think of peasant uprisings, we usually imagine like spontaneous, chaotic riots.
Pitchforks and torches, right?
Yeah, but the Maoist movement in India is incredibly structured. And that structure was designed by people who had absolutely nothing materially to gain from it. We really have to talk about Kobad Gandhi.
Man, let's look at this guy's resume. He is born into wealth, a highly privileged background.
Extremely privileged.
He goes to London to study to become a chartered accountant. He is rubbing shoulders with the global financial elite.
Right.
He has a guaranteed ticket to a life of unimaginable luxury, corporate boardrooms, high society, all of it.
But London in the late 1960s and early 70s was a really volatile place.
Yeah.
Gandhi didn't just study accounting. He experienced the intense systemic racism directed at South Asians in the UK.
Oh, wow.
The book details a specific incident. He was actually participating in an anti-racism protest, and a white fascist gang physically attacked the demonstrators. Gandhi was arrested and thrown into a London prison for 2 months.
Okay, so that cell changes everything.
Completely.
You have a guy who is supposed to be doing corporate audits, and instead, he is radicalizing. He gets out of prison, he sees a single newspaper photo of a peasant uprising back in India, and he makes a decision that just defies all self-preservation.
Yeah, he abandons the accounting career entirely.
He actually had a custom heavy overcoat tailored for himself.
And it wasn't just a regular overcoat. It had 24 secret pockets sewn into the lining.
24 secret pockets. It's like a reverse Bruce Wayne.
That's exactly what it is.
Instead of a billionaire using his vast wealth to build gadgets to maintain the capital status quo, you have an elite intellectual designing custom espionage gear so he can smuggle Marxist literature into the jungle.
Literally burning his own class to the ground.
Exactly. He packs those 24 pockets with revolutionary texts, flies back to Bombay, and just vanishes into the underground.
But here's the thing. Kobad Gandhi's theoretical knowledge is pretty much useless in a vacuum. You cannot start a revolution with just a stack of books.
Right, you need actual people.
You need a spark. You need the muscle. You need people who are actually viscerally suffering. And that takes us to the true genesis of the physical violence, the Spring Thunder.
1967. The village of Naxalbari in West Bengal.
Right?
This is the incident that gave the movement its original name, the Naxalites. And the scale of the inciting incident is incredibly small, like surprisingly small.
It is microscopic compared to the war it triggered. In Naxalbari, the agrarian system was practically feudal. I mean, landlords held absolute power over the cultivators.
Total control.
Yeah. The peasants were permanently indebted, constantly starving, and entirely legally powerless. Then one day, 3 local cultivators decided they had simply had enough.
3 guys.
Just 3. They armed themselves with crude, traditional weapons. We're talking bows, arrows, maybe a sickle.
And they didn't attack a military base. They walked up to a local landlord's granary, and they stole his entire stock of paddy, rice.
They completely emptied the granary.
Didn't leave a single grain behind.
And that act of theft, it was purely about survival. They were hungry.
Yeah, it's that simple.
But politically, it was an earthquake. By taking the paddy, they entirely bypassed the legal system, the police, and the entire social hierarchy.
They proved the landlord's power was just an illusion, right?
Exactly. If the peasants simply decided not to respect it anymore, the power vanishes.
And of course, the state's response to 3 hungry farmers stealing rice was massive, overwhelming retaliation.
Oh, absolutely. The police cracked down violently.
Which only validated the peasants' anger. It proved the police were just acting as a private security force for the rich.
Right, and this is the chemical reaction that birthed the movement. You combine the visceral, starving desperation of a peasant who just wants to eat with the cold, calculated, grand strategy of an intellectual elite like Kobad Gandhi.
The peasants provide the grievance and the manpower.
And the intellectuals provide the organizational structure, the ideology, and the long-term vision. Without the farmers, Gandhi is just a guy with a weird coat.
Right.
And without Gandhi and the other ideologues, the farmers are just a localized riot that gets crushed in a week by the cops.
But together, they built a machine that would eventually bring the Indian state to its knees.
Which is exactly what happened decades later.
Yeah, this slow, quiet organization in the jungles culminated in an event that completely shattered the illusion of Indian national security. I want to jump forward to April 6, 2010.
The Dantewada annihilation.
Right.
This is a massive, massive turning point, because up until this moment, the Indian security apparatus was largely focused elsewhere.
Looking outward mostly.
Right. If you looked at the headlines, the national threat was always framed around the border. The militancy in Kashmir, the threat of Pakistan. The whole idea of a domestic insurgency deep in the central forests was often just dismissed.
Yeah, didn't the Home Minister at the time, P. Chidambaram, publicly referred to the Naxals as simply bandits?
He did, simply bandits, which is a word that implies disorganized, chaotic criminals.
But what happened in the central Indian state of Chhattisgarh on April 6th was absolutely not the work of bandits. It was a masterclass in guerrilla military tactics. Let's break down the mechanics of this ambush.
Okay, so you have a large company of the Central Reserve Police Force, the CRPF. These are elite, highly trained, heavily armed national paramilitary troops.
The best of the best.
Right. They had been out on an area domination exercise in the dense forest. They were exhausted, making their way back to base camp in the early hours of the morning.
But the Maoists had been tracking them.
For days.
And they didn't just rush them in a chaotic mob. The source details how the insurgent militia broke themselves down into smaller, highly coordinated squads.
Using the terrain perfectly.
They utilized the dense jungle terrain so well that they managed to completely encircle the CRPF company before firing a single shot.
Think about the intelligence failure required for that to happen. A massive contingent of elite state forces is completely surrounded by a ragtag militia in their own country.
Mind-blowing.
And when the Maoists finally opened fire, it was absolute devastation. The soldiers tried to fight back, obviously, but they were pinned down.
Completely outmaneuvered and overwhelmed by superior tactical positioning.
Yeah, 75 elite CRPF soldiers and 1 local policeman were killed.
76 state security personnel wiped out in a single morning.
And the Maoists, they suffered almost 0 casualties. They looted all the state-of-the-art weaponry from the dead soldiers and just vanished back into the trees.
It remains the deadliest attack on security forces in the history of India's internal insurgency.
The psychological impact on the government was catastrophic. I mean, you cannot dismiss a force that completely annihilates an entire company of your elite troops.
It proved that while Delhi was busy building malls and watching the border, A shadow military had grown right under their noses,
Yeah.
mastering mobile warfare.
Exactly.
So the obvious question is, how did they get so strong? How do you fund, train, and hide an army capable of wiping out 76 soldiers?
To understand that, you really have to look at the ground they are fighting on.
Right, the Red Corridor. And this is where we hit another just mind-bending paradox.
You're talking about the resource curse. The Red Corridor spans across states like Jharkhand, Orissa, and Chhattisgarh. And beneath the soil of these dense forests lies an unimaginable concentration of natural wealth.
Just staggering amounts.
We are talking about bauxite, iron ore, coal. Minerals worth billions, if not trillions of dollars. It is literally the raw material required to fuel India's explosive economic rise.
So you have trillions of dollars of wealth under the dirt. But the people living on top of the dirt, the Adivasis, the indigenous tribal populations, they are experiencing a level of poverty that is genuinely difficult to comprehend.
It's heartbreaking. The book quotes a Maoist leader stationed in the Bastar region, and his quote is just chilling.
What did he say?
He says, "Our people rarely reach the age of 50. Death begins chasing us right from birth."
Wow. Trillions of dollars under your feet, and you are statistically guaranteed to be dead before you hit your 50th birthday.
Because there are no hospitals, there are no paved roads, there is no clean water infrastructure. The state views the land purely as a resource extraction zone.
And the people living there are just viewed as an inconvenience.
Very much.
And I think the ultimate symbol of this complete state neglect is a region called Abushmad.
Oh, Abushmad is fascinating. The very name in Hindi translates to something that cannot be figured out.
Which is very fitting.
Very. It is a massive, incredibly dense tract of jungle, and for decades, it was a literal blank spot on the modern administrative map of India.
The book states that for years, no forest official, no policeman, no district collector ever set foot in Abushmad.
0% government presence.
The government essentially drew a circle around a massive piece of geography, shrugged their shoulders, and just walked away.
And, well, nature abhors a vacuum, right?
Exactly.
Because the Indian government completely ghosted the region, the Maoists just walked right in. Abushmad became their ultimate fortress. They transformed it into the central guerrilla base.
But they didn't just treat it like a military hideout. This is where the structural genius of the movement becomes apparent. They realized that if the state doesn't exist, they literally have to become the state.
That's exactly right. They established these revolutionary people's committees.
Which is a fully functioning parallel government.
Yeah. They handled land disputes, organized agriculture, and set up their own distinct societal rules.
And the most shocking part of this whole government vacuum, we have to look at the only actual footprint the Indian government left in these liberated zones. The disappearing teachers.
Oh, this detail is completely surreal.
It really is. So in these deeply remote areas, the Indian government supposedly ran state schools. But the reality was a complete farce.
Right.
The government-appointed teachers would almost never show up. I mean, why would they? There are no roads, no oversight, and it's deep in rebel territory.
The book notes that the only time a teacher would reliably appear was once a year, on August 15th.
India's Independence Day.
Right?
Think about the utter absurdity of this. For 364 days a year, the children in these villages receive absolutely zero education, zero medical care, zero state support.
Nothing.
But on exactly one day, a government employee treks into the jungle, hoists the Indian national flag to prove that the state technically owns the land, and then just completely vanishes again.
It is the ultimate symbol of hollow sovereignty. The flag is flying, but civilization is entirely absent. The state demands the symbolism of control without providing any of the actual services of governance.
But ruling a shadow nation in that vacuum requires maintaining order. You have to have a justice system. And when you are a guerrilla army operating in the deep jungle, your version of justice is going to be incredibly viscerally bloody.
This is one of the most difficult and frankly controversial aspects of the entire insurgency. We have to examine the psychology of vengeance.
Right.
And to do that, we need to ask a question that violates every norm of a civilized society. How does a gruesome beheading become a form of profound psychological therapy?
Just let that sentence sink in. Beheading as therapy. It sounds like madness.
It does.
But the source material explains the brutal logic behind it. It traces back to the movement's founder, Charu Mazumdar, and his doctrine of the annihilation of class enemies.
Yeah, and Mazumdar's theory was intensely debated even within his own communist ranks. A lot of the mid-level leaders felt it was way too extreme, too alienating.
Sure.
But Mazumdar believed that you couldn't just have a political revolution. You couldn't just seize the land. He argued that the revolution could only be solidified through the physical, bloody elimination of the landlords themselves. The class enemies had to be wiped out.
But why? Like, why not just exile them? Why the insistence on deeply intimate physical violence?
Well, context is everything here. We really have to look at the societal structure in places like the state of Bihar. Bihar was a powder keg of rigid, violently enforced caste lines.
Right, the caste system.
The Dalits and lower castes were treated as less than human. They were subjected to generations of systemic humiliation, forced labor, and just extreme physical violence.
The source actually details the formation of upper caste militant organizations, groups like the Ranveer Sena, which was formed in the 1990s.
Yeah.
And these weren't just like political lobbying groups. They were heavily armed death squads. They would march into lower caste villages and carry out absolute slaughters, massacres of men, women, and children.
And because the landlords controlled the local police and the judiciary, there were absolutely no legal consequences.
None. The state justice system was invisible.
Right. So if the police are watching you get massacred and doing nothing, what is your only recourse?
Retaliation.
Pure, unadulterated vengeance. The Maoist factions, specifically the Maoist Communist Center at the time, stepped into that vacuum of justice. They organized the lower castes, they formed retaliatory militias.
And they instituted a very specific, terrifying punishment for the landlords they deemed responsible. The decree was that the class enemies must be shortened by 6 inches.
Shortened by 6 inches.
It is a chilling euphemism for decapitation.
It is.
But it wasn't just about killing the enemy. The book delves into the specific, terrifying mindset of the laborer executing this order.
Right. A senior Maoist leader explains the psychology in the text. Imagine a bonded laborer. His father was a slave to the landlord. His grandfather was a slave.
Generations of trauma.
Generations. He has been beaten, starved, and treated literally worse than livestock his entire life. Over time, that laborer begins to believe that the landlord is biologically different. He believes the landlord literally does not possess a human heart.
Wow.
So when the Maoist militia finally overruns the landlord's estate, the laborer doesn't just want to shoot the man from a distance. The source explicitly states that the laborer wants to kill the master with a blade.
He wants to get up close.
He wants to physically open the chest cavity. He wants to reach inside and manually check if a heart actually exists underneath the rib cage.
I mean, the trauma required to drive a human being to that point is just unfathomable.
It really is. The book states that executing the landlord in this highly personal, visceral manner gives the tribal guerrilla immense satisfaction. It is a catastrophic release of pent-up generational anger.
It's the bloody rebalancing of the scales. When a society completely removes the safety net of equitable law, extreme vigilante violence isn't seen as a crime by the oppressed.
No.
It is seen as the only functioning mechanism of justice.
But it is crucial to understand that extreme violence wasn't always the default setting. I mean, the tragedy of this conflict is that many of these communities actively tried to play by the rules first.
Right, they really did.
They tried to use the democratic system to better their lives.
And the system punished them for it.
Yeah.
Let's look at the story of Baisa. This is a story of how the promise of education, the ultimate democratic equalizer, was turned into a weapon.
Baisa's story is heartbreaking. He was the son of a washerman, a Dalit, the absolute bottom of the rigid social hierarchy.
Yeah.
In his village, his entire existence was supposed to be defined by cleaning other people's clothes. But Baisa defied the odds. Through sheer grit, he pursued his education.
He didn't just finish school. He earned a master's degree.
Right.
In any functioning society, Baisa is a triumph. He is the poster child for upward mobility. He gets an official admission letter for further studies, a piece of paper that proves he has officially broken the cycle of poverty.
But in a deeply feudal, caste-obsessed society, a Dalit with a master's degree isn't a success story. He is an existential threat.
Exactly.
The local high caste elites could not tolerate a washerman's son achieving higher status than them. When Baisa's admission letter arrived at the local post office, the upper caste men intercepted it.
And they didn't just throw it away. They made a public spectacle of it. They tracked Baisa down. They brutally beat him. And right in front of his face, they tore the admission letter to shreds.
They systematically destroyed his legal, peaceful pathway out of poverty. They beat him to send a clear message. Your intelligence doesn't matter. Your hard work doesn't matter. You will always be beneath us.
So what does a man do when he realizes the system is entirely rigged against him? When a master's degree is basically a target on his back?
Baissa didn't go back to washing clothes.
No, he went to the jungle, he picked up a rifle. The state's failure to protect him literally manufactured another insurgent.
And Baissa's story is just a microscopic example of a much broader agrarian crisis. A crisis where peaceful requests were continually met with bloodshed. We really have to examine the Jagdeel strike of 1978.
Yeah, this is a perfect example of the poor trying to use the bureaucracy. In September 1978, student rebels and agricultural laborers organized massive strikes in the Karimnagar district.
And they were protesting forced free labor and demanding basic wage increases.
The scale was massive. Over 1 lakh, that is 100,000 agricultural workers, participated in the strike. And their primary goal was land redistribution. They wanted to legally occupy unexploited government land.
100,000 people. In a democracy, that is a massive voting bloc. You would assume the politicians would rush to accommodate them.
You would think so.
And the laborers did it completely by the book. The source details how they meticulously filled out formal written applications for the land. They did the paperwork.
Literally doing the paperwork.
A Maoist rebel recalled how they collected 2 full gunny bags, like 2 massive sacks stuffed to the brim with these written applications to submit to the government.
2 sacks of desperate legal pleas for a patch of dirt. But the response from the entrenched power structure was immediate and lethal. A Dalit man named Pushetti was the first to successfully occupy a piece of this unexploited land.
And the landlords didn't take him to court.
No, they just murdered him. They assassinated Pushetti to set an example.
The message from the establishment was absolute. Your paperwork is garbage. Your peaceful protests are a nuisance. And if you dare to step out of your designated economic lane, you will be killed.
When peaceful reform becomes literally impossible, violent revolution becomes inevitable. And this agrarian crisis didn't stop in the 70s. It compounded. The economic structure of rural India became a death trap.
We have to fast forward and look at the state of Andhra Pradesh between 1998 and 2008.
Okay.
The book highlights a horrific statistic regarding tenant farmers. These are agricultural workers who do not own the land. They lease it from landlords at exorbitant rates, and they borrow money for seeds and fertilizer at predatory interest rates.
So the math is rigged from the start.
Exactly. If a crop fails due to drought or pests, the debt doesn't vanish. It compounds. The farmer loses everything. And the shame and financial ruin drove people to the ultimate extreme. Over that 10-year period, over 20,000 tenant farmers committed suicide in Andhra Pradesh.
Let's just pause on that number. 20,000 suicides.
It's unbelievable.
It is an invisible genocide. If a biological virus wiped out 20,000 people in a single state, the international community would be flooding the zone with aid. It would be headline news every single night.
Absolutely.
But because they died by their own hands, trapped in a rigged economic system, it barely registers. The book points out that in just one single district, Krishna district, in December 2010 alone, 50 farmers killed themselves.
And this systemic failure is the oxygen for the Maoist insurgency. I mean, a veteran police officer who was actually appointed to investigate the Dantewada ambush concluded that the primary reason Maoism flourished wasn't because the tribals read Karl Marx.
Right.
It flourished because of the land ownership patterns.
When the government ignores your gunny bags full of applications, when the police allow landlords to murder activists in broad daylight, and when the economic structure drives 20,000 of your neighbors to drink pesticide, you stop viewing the Maoists as terrorists.
Yeah, you view them as the only functioning defense mechanism available to you.
So how did the Indian state react to this monumental socioeconomic collapse? Did they implement massive land reforms? Did they build schools and hospitals in the Red Corridor?
No, they responded the way massive states often respond to complex social problems. They applied overwhelming, blunt military force.
Try to shoot their way out of a poverty crisis.
Exactly. And the collateral damage was catastrophic. The government forged highly specialized anti-Naxal police units, the most famous being the Greyhounds in Andhra Pradesh and the C-60 Commandos in Maharashtra.
And these units were trained specifically for deep jungle guerrilla warfare.
Right. And on paper, the state claimed these units were highly efficient. They were taking out Maoist commanders. But the reality on the ground for the civilian population was a living nightmare.
What happens when the elite forces sent to supposedly protect the nation become the monsters terrorizing the villages?
We have to look at the data on encounters. The book cites statistics from the Andhra Pradesh Civil Liberties Committee. Between 1997 and 2007, in that one state alone, there were 1,800 encounter deaths.
1,800. And we really need to define what an encounter actually means in this context. While some were certainly genuine firefights with armed insurgents, human rights organizations have documented that hundreds of these were fake encounters.
Right. A fake encounter is essentially an extrajudicial execution,
Murder.
basically. The police detain a suspect, often just a local tribal villager accused by an informant. They take him deep into the forest, execute him in cold blood, and then plant a rusty weapon on the body.
Wow.
They file a report claiming the suspect opened fire on them and they shot back in self-defense. And the officers involved often receive bounties, medals, and promotions for a high kill count.
It is a system that literally incentivizes the murder of innocent people. And the brutality didn't stop at fake encounters. The book gives us a highly specific, horrifying example of how these police operations completely radicalized the local population.
The story of the Patawi family.
Yes, it details the story of Kaju Patawi.
Right, so Kaju was just a local villager returning to his home after spending the day in the jungle collecting wild berries. A completely mundane, innocent activity. But his house was suddenly raided by the C-60 commando force.
They were hunting for Naxal rebels. They demanded Kaju tell them where the insurgents were hiding. When Kaju honestly told them he didn't know, the police didn't just leave.
No, they began to beat him relentlessly.
But the violence escalated far beyond an interrogation. The police noticed Kaju's sister-in-law in the house. She was just a teenage girl.
It's awful.
The officers grabbed her by her hair, dragged her out, and baselessly accused her of being a Naxal sympathizer. They held her overnight. The next morning, they dragged this teenage girl out to a nearby field. They blindfolded her, they tied her hands behind her back, and the police officers gang-raped her. She later specifically named the commander of the unit, a man named Muna Sakur, as the first person who violated her.
Think about the psychological fallout of this event. The state operates under an absolute paranoid doctrine of either you are with us or you are against us.
A completely black and white worldview.
Exactly. A senior police officer is actually quoted in the book explicitly stating that the line between a civilian and a Maoist had completely blurred in his mind. He said, "The Adivasi you saw plucking dead tree branches during the day might turn into a gun-toting Naxal in the night."
When the police view every single innocent civilian as a potential enemy, they treat them like enemies. And by doing so, they create a self-fulfilling prophecy.
It's the ultimate tragic irony of the state's counterinsurgency strategy.
By burning down houses, executing villagers in fake encounters, and raping teenage girls, the police force became the #1 recruiting agent for the Maoist army.
If you are a young person in that village and you watch the police commit these atrocities with total impunity, what choice do you have?
None.
A rebel might demand you share some of your food. A police officer might execute your brother and assault your sister. The state forces entirely alienated the population, leaving them nowhere to turn but to the Maoists.
And the Maoists were ready to absorb them. With the state acting as a hostile, occupying force, the insurgents easily entrenched their parallel government. They didn't just want to be an angry militia hiding in the trees. They wanted to run a highly structured society.
Yeah, the organizational structure of the Communist Party of India Maoist is deeply bureaucratic and surprisingly egalitarian in certain aspects.
Like what?
Well, in the liberated zones, they instituted policies like equal pay for women and men in agricultural labor, which was virtually unheard of in traditional Indian society.
Wow. But building this massive underground republic required a massive base of members. How do you recruit hundreds of thousands of people into a shadow nation?
You make the barrier to entry practically non-existent.
Right. According to their party constitution, any resident of India who has reached 16 years of age can officially join the party. All they have to do is accept the ideological tenets of Marxism, Leninism, Maoism, and be recommended by 2 existing party members.
And the cost. The official membership fee is 10 rupees per annum.
10 rupees a year.
It is absolute pennies. It ensures that the poorest, most destitute laborer in the country can officially become part of a political movement that promises to fight for them.
It is a masterclass in grassroots mobilization. You have a massive army of youth radicalized by state violence, paying 10 rupees to join a shadow government that actually regulates their economy and provides a brutal but functioning system of justice.
Yeah.
But here's the final chilling pivot in the source material. The Maoists know they cannot win a national war if they stay completely contained inside the Bujmad jungle.
This is what truly terrifies the Indian intelligence apparatus. The Maoists developed an explicit, documented urban agenda.
We have spent this entire deep dive talking about deep forests, tribal villagers, and stolen paddy. But the Maoists are looking at the concrete jungle,
Right. Their internal documents explicitly state their strategic goal to connect the struggles of laborers in mining towns, like Giridi in the state of Harkand, with the workers in massive modern industrial hubs.
Specifically, they targeted Gurgaon.
Gurgaon, I mean, if you know anything about modern India, Gurgaon is the absolute crown jewel of the corporate capitalist boom.
It sits right on the border of New Delhi.
Yeah, it is a sprawling metropolis of massive glass skyscrapers, multinational corporate headquarters, luxury condominiums, and massive tech parks.
It is the exact opposite of the Abusma jungle, and yet the Maoists are actively trying to bring their guerrilla war into the corporate boardroom. How? Why?
Because they understand the mechanics of capitalism. They believe that the wealth glittering in Gurgaon is directly extracted from the sweat and blood of the workers in places like Giridi.
It's all connected in their eyes.
Exactly. They see the displaced construction worker in Delhi, the guy who couldn't afford the 100 rupee as the exact same victim as the Adivasi whose land was stolen for a bauxite mine.
The Maoist leadership stated plainly, if Giridi is liberated first, then basing on its strength and on the struggles of the working class in Gurgaon, Gurgaon would be liberated later.
It is a chillingly patient, long-term operational strategy. They are officially moving their military doctrine from a phase of strategic defense, which basically means just holding their ground in the forest, to a phase of mobile warfare.
They are actively building an underground network to extend their reach into the cities.
They want to channel the immense, simmering anger of the urban poor, the factory workers who are laid off overnight, the slum dwellers who are bulldozed for a sporting event, and mold that massive demographic into a coordinated national strike force.
The red flag is quietly being raised in the shadow of the skyscrapers, and that brings us full circle.
It really does.
We have dissected the mechanics of a 50-year shadow war. We started with 3 starving farmers stealing a single bag of rice in 1967. We looked at the elite intellectuals trading luxury for the jungle, the 20,000 suicides, the horrific caste violence, the fake police encounters, and the trillions of dollars of wealth buried under the poorest people on earth. Where does all of this leave us?
It leaves us staring at a historical loop. The Maoist insurgency in India is not some bizarre artifact from the Cold War era. It is a living, breathing reality born from a very specific, highly combustible set of conditions.
Yeah.
As long as the extreme paradox exists, where a society builds luxury malls while its laborers literally starve, and where vast natural wealth is guarded by people dying before the age of 50, the war will not end.
The state cannot simply arrest, torture, or shoot its way out of a socioeconomic chasm this deep. Violence only breeds more radicalization. You listening right now might be sitting in a comfortable apartment in a Western city, thinking this is a deeply localized, exclusively Indian problem. But look closely at the underlying mechanics we've unpacked today.
It's universal.
Extreme wealth inequality, the total indifference of the state to the working class, the prioritization of corporate land grabs over human lives, the violent suppression of peaceful protests.
These are absolutely not isolated variables. As the world pushes further into a hyper-globalized, hyper-technological future, the fault line between the ultra-rich elite and the marginalized working class is widening in almost every major nation on Earth.
Right.
The complex arithmetic that crushed the laborer in Delhi is actively crushing people in cities across the globe right now.
Which brings me to a final provocative thought I want you to sit with. Think all the way back to Naxal Bari in 1967. 3 starving farmers stealing 1 single bag of rice. That tiny, isolated act of theft was the spark that ignited a 50-year bloody insurgency because the underlying pressure in the society had reached a breaking point. Look around at our modern, hyper-connected, incredibly unequal world today.
The pressure is building.
As the pressure builds, what is the bag of rice waiting to be stolen in our society? What is the tiny, overlooked spark waiting to ignite the next spring thunder?
It is a terrifying question. But until the world addresses the root causes of extreme desperation, the shadow of the Red Corridor will serve as a dark, violent mirror for our entire global future.
The war zone might be much closer than you think. Thanks for joining us on this massive deep dive. We'll see you next time.